Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed part one. My name is John, and I'm your host and advocate for the sacred plant. I'd like to introduce you to our expert this evening, Corinne Malanca of United Patients Group. Welcome, Corinne.
Thank you.
So let's get started. We'll go right into part two. Our first question is, how can I find out if cannabis is legal in my state? So, Corinne, would you like to answer that?
That one's pretty simple. On our website, we do have a section for laws by state, and it will list all of the pertinent information, email addresses, physical addresses, and phone numbers of your state's health department, and everything you should need to find those answers.
Great. So thank you for answering that last question as well. And here's one here. So this one goes out. In episode 5, I heard 5-to-1 ratio of 5 parts THC, 1 part CBD for cancer in one case. And then I heard again in Jill's cancer was a 1-to-1 ratio. Which is it? Your program title was Find and Access. Find and access what? This is the real question which your program didn't answer, and it was frustrating. So thank you for that question. Corinne, would you like to touch up on the different formulations and why
Yes.
it's not a one-size-fits-all?
Yes, so when you heard about the 5-to-1 ratio and a possible 1-to-1 ratio, that's a perfect example of how individual this medicine is. All cancers are not treated the same. All breast cancers are not treated the same. All lung cancers and so on. They're different based on medical history of the patient, the current meds and supplements that they may be on, their age, weight, etc. So yes, it's very, very frustrating and very tedious, and it's one of the number one questions we get is just tell me about dosing, just tell me what I need to know, and it's just not that simple. There are many puzzle pieces to coming up with the proper protocol for each patient. And we're a great resource. We're happy to answer any of your questions. There are plenty of medical cannabis consultants that have medical backgrounds that do consultations. We offer that as well. And that's where you will find, first and foremost, what formulation and dosing is best for you and your condition. But in addition to that, if you're in a cannabis legal state, you will get recommendations on where to go and where to find this. Many people will forego all of that and decide, I'm in a cannabis legal state, I'm just going to go to a dispensary. And it's just good to keep in mind that you should only buy products, that you can see a test result. Ask the people working at the dispensary if you could see the test results for any particular formulation that you're looking at. But also know already going in what you need to buy. They don't have a medical background in dispensaries. They have a lot of knowledge about how and what each product does, but they don't know your medical background. They don't know your history, whether you have any heart arrhythmia like my father or what have you. So they're just merely suggesting certain products and formulations based on a condition, not your condition, not your personal body. So it's very important to know what to ask coming in. I spent, 45 minutes on the phone with a woman recently, last week, who was going to be going into a dispensary. She felt time was of the essence, and she didn't have time to research and wait and hopefully get a specific recommendation of a formulation from somebody, and she decided she was just going to go into a dispensary. And I gave her many, many topics to ask when going in. Is she buying hemp? Is she buying cannabis CBD or hemp CBD? Are there lab tests? What's the carrier oil in it? There's so many questions to ask when you're freely just going into a dispensary. And I think it's important to have that knowledge base, but understand completely your frustration navigating this industry because it's not regulated or hardly regulated. This is the best we have right now. Our goal is always to streamline and get patients as quickly as they can to the proper formulation without getting ripped off. There are a lot of pitfalls in this industry, and it's important to handhold these patients. It's our mission to handhold these patients. And so our goal is that you don't spend too much money, that you get the proper product right out of the gate so you know you're targeting your condition. And I feel for these people. It's very much a frustration, but we are here to help and help you navigate swiftly this field.
And I'm going to go right into the next question here. You mentioned hemp,
Yes.
hemp CBD, cannabis CBD. The question is, Ty interchanged the word cannabis and hemp. I am confused.
Yeah, so geneticists say the plants are the same. We say, medically speaking, they're different. So CBD in hemp, CBD in cannabis, CBD is the same molecule no matter where you find it. But when there's a lot of states, I understand that they don't have access to whole plant medicine. And so the best bet they have is a CBD product. At least it's something. It's something of health and wellness and anti-inflammatory and just wellness in general. So we understand, and even epilepsy, we understand that that's the best that some people can do. But if you have access to whole plant medicine, which not only has CBD, but THC and THCA, the acids, the subcannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids, again, working all in concert with each other, is a much more efficient way to treat disease. But people are in a tough position and have to go with what they have access to. So I get that.
So back to the CBD. Next question is, how can I get non-psychoactive cannabis?
Another great question. So CBD is not psychoactive, and THCA, the acid form, is not psychoactive. Many people do take during the day a CBD and a THCA tincture for health and wellness and fighting cancer as well. But again, it depends on what you're treating. I mean, that is specifically in the non-psychoactive area, but when you're treating cancers, you do need some THC. That doesn't mean you have to be high at all. So I encourage people to understand that just because there's some THC in a product, that doesn't mean you're going to be high. There's a great balance in products with all the cannabinoids, and I think Dad's capsule was about 12 milligrams, but also had THCA in it and hasn't had any psychoactive effect.
Great answer, Corinne. Thank you for that as well. Here's another one. After just viewing episode 4, I have mixed feelings of anger and sadness, which keep on coming up. When Ty talked about the children whose parents were jailed for having saved the lives of their own flesh and blood, when conventional medicine failed to do so, a critical question came up about this issue. Do we even have time to wait for politicians to decide if our children's lives are important?
We had a call yesterday, somebody looking for an attorney. This child had cancer. The parents had been under the care of their pediatric oncologist.
And they lived in a legal state.
They lived in a legal state, yes. And they ended up treating their child successfully with cannabis oil. The child has no signs of cancer. The scans are clear. And now the oncologist, number one, is saying unless this child does radiation, that they will not write in the child's record that that child is in remission. They will not write that unless they do radiation, even though the child is clear of cancer. And also, they have reported that family to Child Protective Services, which is so, so sad. And we've seen this so many times where a child will be sent home after exhausting all conventional treatment, and the doctors tell the parents, there's nothing more we can do. They send the child home on hospice, and that's when the family says, I'm going to try this cannabis oil if it's could possibly help. And then the doctors will report them to Child Protective Services, and in turn, the family is forced to put their child through chemo and radiation when they were sent home already, that the doctors had exhausted all those treatments. So families are put in a very, very tough position. It's unfortunate. And again, in my opinion, these doctors need a lot of education on this topic. I believe even if they feel like their hands are legally tied, I believe that their actions would be quite different if they had the knowledge and the science under their belt. But families are suffering. Children are being taken away at the worst time in their life from their parents when doctors had given up, and then the families and the children get punished for trying one last thing to save their life. It's heart-wrenching. It really is heart-wrenching.
Along those lines, we have a personal story that we could share with you regarding pediatrics and cannabis. Do you want to share that story?
Yes, we have a dear family friend who had a child that had, I think it's DIPG, but it was a terrible brain tumor. I think he was diagnosed at the age of 2, and they had exhausted all conventional treatment. He had been in a coma for 49 days, something like that. And the father said, I'm going to give him cannabis oil. And this is before we were hearing about cannabis oil. They're true pioneers in terms of pediatrics and cannabis. His wife is a nurse, and she was saying, no way, you're not going to do this. And he says, yes, I am, because he was dying. They didn't think he was going to come out of the coma. And amongst so many other things that happened to him at the hospital. But the father ended up administering cannabis oil, and cutting the story way short, he did go into remission, and the child went home, and they were very happy and living comfortably. But then the tumor returned, and so this is so long ago, he didn't know that there should be a maintenance dose, and so they put the child back on cannabis oil, and he beat it again a second time. And in his state, the laws changed. It was medically legal, and at that time, then it switched to medically legal but illegal to grow and distribute. So access was a challenge, and this little boy passed away at the age of 4. And gosh, I mean, there are many stories like this. There's some stories which is so heart-wrenching that the children don't even have an option to even start trying, and they have to suffer through what we see on the internet, these kids, chemo and radiation, and they're bloating up, and they're on steroids, and they're begging, just like our friend's child would beg, no more pokes, no more pokes. And it was just heart-wrenching. But in the end, Kashi, the little boy's name is Kashi, passed away in his father's arms, and his town knew how he was treating his son. He was very vocal. The father was very vocal about the treatment. And so, and especially his wife being a nurse, their story was commonplace. And when the call went in to report that Kashi had passed, their friends at the hospital said, okay, we'll wait, we'll give you some time to let you have some time with your child. But when the police arrived, they came in, there was numerous ones, I think there was about 5 police officers, and they took this child who had just passed in his father's arms away from the father, and they took the child back to the back bedroom to remove his clothes to see if there was any abuse. And that's
Foul play.
Yeah, foul play. And that's what they went through when the whole family was grieving in the house that this child had just passed. So the stigma, everything that's going on with how people approach this plant has been tearing families apart, and this family thankfully are thriving and doing well. But Kashi's passing was heart-wrenching on all levels, especially when that child was ripped from his father's arms and where they took his clothes off. And so yes, these things are happening all the time with children. I'm not quite sure if physicians and law enforcement know what to do with the possible treatment of children with cannabis oil, and everybody's grasping at straws. But when they're given a death sentence, and where a physician says there's nothing more we can do, there should be freedom to do whatever you want to do. There should be freedom anyway.
I've come to understand that cannabis just does not work for everybody. What are your thoughts?
This is true. It doesn't work for everybody, and we don't have all the reasons for that. We know people that respond immediately from the most minute amount of cannabis treatment, and then we know other people who definitely see improvement in their sleep, in their anxiety, but in terms of their disease, they may be just thrilled with the fact that the tumors are not growing. We don't know why it works so well for some and only in a small level with other people, and which is why we need human trials here in the United States. We need this research in the U.S., and we have enough anecdotal evidence with patients that our government should be funding human trials here in the U.S. There's no reason that we should not be funding these trials. And to get to the bottom of why this is, why some people respond so well and others don't. But what we do know is that it doesn't hurt anybody. So if somebody is not sent into remission with cannabis oil, they are seeing improvement in their life, in their quality of life. So all I can say is write your congressman and insist on human trials in the U.S.
Here's a big question for you. Just wondering if calling cannabis a medicine, if the door is being left open for pharma companies and the government to control and own it all.
Well, the door is open for pharma companies and government to own it all. I don't believe myself that it's because we call it medicine. It is medicine, and it always has been medicine. It was utilized here in the U.S., as we saw in episode 1. It has been utilized quite significantly as a medicine here in the U.S. So I don't believe it's because it's called medicine. But yes, big pharma and government, as we speak, is trying to wrap their hands around it and secure it for themselves. I mean, we see in many of the U.S. patents, there's a couple pharmaceutical companies, overseas pharmaceutical companies, that have U.S. patents on cannabinoids as medicine. One's GW Pharmaceutical and another one is Otsuka Pharmaceutical out of Japan. So the door is open, unfortunately. We hope that they will maintain the integrity of the plant. If they don't, my worry is that the black market will be fueled, and we will continue, as we have for decades, providing for ourselves rather than moving forward. So hopefully we don't go down that road.
Here's a question for you. I'm a senior citizen and I'm afraid to ask my doctor. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are to ask initially what his or her thoughts are on medical cannabis, and it kind of test the waters to see what their knowledge level is. You'll learn quite quickly, definitely on their body language, but of what their stance on it is. You probably won't get an answer that they're fully knowledgeable and up to speed. You probably won't find that, but you'll find if they're open to the discussion. If they're not open to the discussion, I would find another doctor myself.
On that note, we spoke at a retirement community once, and I always ask that question, how many people have discussed this with their doctors? And we had a woman that raised her hand, and she said, I asked my doctor, and my doctor said, if you try this, I'm demanding that you get another doctor.
Yeah.
And then, so I said, what'd you do? She goes, I fired my doctor. So we applauded her because this is her life. This is her health. And it's not illegal, even if you're in an illegal state, to ask a question about medical cannabis.
Well, it's important because they take an oath, physicians, to do no harm, alleviate pain and suffering, and they take that oath. And if I were a physician, I would be getting the education just to make sure I'm not missing something from my patients, and to be able to converse on the topic. It is my opinion that it's irresponsible that a physician would treat patients and not have the science, the understanding of how cannabis works. They don't have to treat patients with it or recommend it at all, but I believe that it's a detriment to their practice and their ability to treat patients as a whole without this information. So I think it's very serious, and I would be switching doctors if my doctor was not open to the discussion or the exploration of cannabis.
It is, like I mentioned before, it is becoming a ripple effect. Docuseries like this, The Sacred Plant, and others that people are asking about this question about medical cannabis. Can it help me? We get that question quite a bit. These doctors are getting these questions
Often.
on a regular basis now. So education is a key part for this.
And education is legal, and we have continuing medical education, so physicians can earn their continuing education units per year, which is a requirement to maintain their license, while studying cannabinoid science. And there's no harm in that, so why not?
So thank you, Corinne. Here's another one we can touch up on. How and who can I obtain my medical cannabis license from in my area? So I don't know where their area is, but if you want to touch
Yes,
up on
it definitely depends on where your area is and the laws there. Even with that, each state has a different criteria of how to obtain a license. In California, it's very simple and easy. You can get a letter written by your physician, and then you're good to go. You're free to obtain medical cannabis. There's also online video conferencing with physicians as well. But then there's other states that it could be a 3 to 6 months process and quite a fee to apply for your medical cannabis license, paperwork, and so on. I heard from somebody recently on the East Coast who was still waiting, and it had been 3 months. And gosh, we know with my father that would not have worked. We did not have 1 month. So each state is different, and again, it's best to go check our laws by state section, and you can find all your information there.
Next up we have, is cannabis a cure, or do these people have to continue taking cannabis the rest of their lives to keep them in remission for whatever disease they have? I know Corinne's answer here. I mean, we never use the word cure, so.
Yeah, we never use the word cure. We use the word treat. In terms of having to stay on cannabis, many people stay on what we call a maintenance dose. It's like taking a vitamin every day. It's not something you would notice in your everyday life. It's not going to impair you. But there's also research around what we call endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. So I always say diabetics need insulin because their body isn't making the proper levels of insulin. Same in the endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome. We have an endocannabinoid system. Some people's system is not as healthy as others. And so in turn, we need to fill in that gap and feed that body, that system, cannabinoids. They fit perfectly together, and it's a great health and wellness. You know, it kind of harkens back to our discussion about using it as a health and wellness or preventative. It's a very healthy product. It doesn't have to be psychoactive, even if it has all the constituents in it. But in terms of cure, yes, we don't use that word, especially in the medical community. They don't want to hear that. And I don't know in the conventional world when they say somebody is cured. I don't even think in terms of cancer. I mean, my dad's 6+ years out since his remission, and his doctors don't say cured. So.
And you want to share that your dad is still taking
yes, a maintenance dose. Absolutely, he's taken a maintenance dose, and we actually see a difference when he goes to travel and he's not traveling with his medicine, or when he comes back, that we definitely see an upswing in his cognitive abilities, his pain in his body, typical arthritic symptoms, things like that. So we can tell when he's gone off and when he's gone back on. Unfortunately, with travel, it's very difficult to travel with this medicine.
And actually, I have two questions that will lead into that. One, can I smoke cannabis and get the same benefits? And the other one is, can I travel with my medicine? So which one would you like to touch up on there?
Traveling is difficult, and I'm not one to say, yes, you can travel with it, because it is illegal to travel across state lines with cannabis in any form. Even if you have two legal states side by side, it's illegal to transport across state lines. So with that said, people are taking their medicine with them. We don't advise people on how to do that. It seems that they're doing it successfully. My hope is that our government and law enforcement is not looking for such minute amounts of cannabis tincture as opposed to huge drug trafficking and tons or hundreds of pounds of cannabis. So that's my hope. But traveling can be a challenge, more specifically overseas, internationally.
Yeah. Can I smoke cannabis and get the same benefits? And I know we touched up on this on part one of our Q&A session last night.
So my question would be the same benefits as what? Meaning remission from a cancer? No. Pain relief? Yes, you could get the same pain relief and a faster onset by smoking, hopefully vaporizing. But in terms of treating disease, no, there's some big gaps in there that you cannot treat certain diseases by smoking. Autoimmune conditions where you again need pain relief, that could be successful, but so the answer is no. But he doesn't say, or she doesn't say
what they're treating. It just,
yeah, it
can I
doesn't
smoke
say
cannabis and get
to
the
get the
same
same
benefits?
benefit. So that's kind of a wide open question, but smoking does not treat as many diseases as the extracted methods.
Here's a great one too. What to do if your employer has a zero tolerance policy and you much rather use cannabis than pharmaceuticals?
Wow, your hands are kind of tied on that. Your best hope is to have a sit down. If you're being treated medically with cannabis, have a sit down and talk with your employer. But if your employer is as staunch as this question sounds like it, you may have to seek other employment or risk a random drug test and being fired. So that's a tough predicament to be in. But understanding that you don't want to do pharmaceuticals and you'd rather do cannabis as a medicine, we totally understand that and support that. But you have to weigh the pros and cons with the company that you work for.
And, we have a good friend of ours now, but he was a patient coming from an illegal state. Actually, his child was a patient, and he was a cannabis refugee. They moved to California, and he interviewed for, won't mention the name, but it's a corporate America company. And they asked, why are you moving? You've had a great job in your state. And he said, I'm actually here because I need medical cannabis for my child. And they were open arm, more than happy. And he has a great position, and he feels good that he's been able to speak openly with his current employer. And there's times that he has to go to a doctor's appointment, and they're more than happy to support him throughout this journey with his child. So,
and his child's doing very
and
well.
his child's
Very,
doing
very
extremely
well.
So
Yes.
here's a question that just came through. What is needed for the federal ban on medical cannabis to be lifted?
Well, in my wildest dreams, we need to bring a classroom into the Capitol and present the science to, I guess I can't say names, but there are many people, decision makers in our government, that would benefit greatly from the scientific education of this plant and its medicinal benefits. And I believe, it's my opinion only, that to lift the federal ban would be mass education, required education of the endocannabinoid system and cannabis as a medicine. So that's my vote, is education. Obviously, we have a lot of protesting. We have a lot of people writing letters. We have petitions. Those all help greatly. There's some wonderful organizations that work tirelessly to bring this subject to our decision makers in this country.
Cancer doesn't discriminate, and that's the one thing. And God forbid it happens to your family, but cancer doesn't discriminate, and for
disease doesn't discriminate.
Disease
it's all
doesn't.
disease.
And for someone to be in this situation and looking for another option, I say just research cannabis, what this plant can actually do. People always ask, does it work on this? Does it help with this? And I don't want to say it's like duct tape with 1,000,001 uses, but when you really get down to it, it literally is a miracle plant. To see all of the doings and benefits that it does have on different diseases is truly incredible.
Even if just with the anti-inflammation properties alone, if it were just that, that would make a dramatic difference in people's outcomes and their lives.
In episode 5, they mentioned the word fecal oil. What is fecal oil?
Fecal oil is full extract cannabis oil. That's the term used in our industry for the extracted thick oil that people take for chronic disease. It is the cannabis oil. There are other terms that are used, synonymous with name brands, but it's called fecal oil, and it comes in various 15 or more different formulations and potencies. So we refer to cannabis oil as fecal oil.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Here's a question for you. Is THC harmful for my child? I've used homemade THC products on my 7-year-old to treat his asthma and it has been very effective.
We see great results with children being treated with cannabis in various formulations. Clearly, this is not smoking cannabis. There's specific ways to treat children, but it's a perfect time to discuss the dire need for research in this country. We're behind many other countries in terms of research, and we should not be. We should be leading the way in research in cannabis as a medicine. If we had some research, we would be discussing the developing brain and how cannabis is affecting, even if it's being utilized in a vapor system, say for the epileptic children, to cancer treatments where it's the oil, we would have a clearer picture. But at this point, unfortunately, our country is not allowing it.
Is cannabis a gateway drug?
Oh, that's a good one. Many would like us to believe that it is a gateway drug. As of now, cannabis is being used as an exit drug. With that said, I mean, even in California, in Southern California, there was a recent report of a treatment center utilizing cannabis as an exit drug for all these heavier drugs. I do have to emphasize that there are people who have addictive tendencies and habitual tendencies. So in terms of recreationally smoking weed through junior high and high school, that could be a habit-forming process. There are no studies that it rolls over into the heavier drug use. There are more at-risk people, but what we're discussing here is medical cannabis, and this is not the recreational use. It's very, very strict formulation and dosing. It's not recreational for some people. It's not fun at all. But they're two separate optics to look through, and we understand that people are concerned for their children when they're in school, and it's becoming what they do, and their homework falls behind and their grades drop, and that's a different section to address. But currently they're talking about cannabis as an exit drug. It's very successful with getting people off of painkillers, opioids, meth, and so on, where there are specialists in this area that know how to wean these people off of these heavy drugs while adding in the proper dosage of a cannabis tincture or oil, and people are doing it successfully. And we hope that there's more research into this area because it's extremely important, and I believe that the science will help alleviate the fear for families. I mean, even in California, where there's plenty of dispensaries, and a lot of the neighborhood families are worried that their children are going to have more access and that they're going to now start smoking weed. And when we talk to our children, the products in dispensaries cost more than it does from their local grower who sells to the high schoolers and college students. Not that we condone this, but there are strict guidelines for the dispensaries, and these kids are not accessing this dispensaries, and they're not getting their products from there when they're using it recreationally. But I just like to really emphasize that we're addressing medical treatment of chronic and grave illnesses here. and addressing chronic use in children is a very important topic, but it's separate from what we're doing here.
So back to that important topic, we get this quite a bit as well. Parents who've educated their children their whole life that medical cannabis is bad. Stay away,
Or
stay
just
away,
cannabis
stay
is
away.
bad.
Excuse me, cannabis is bad.
Yeah.
And now one of their loved ones gets sick and they're seeing the benefits of this plant. What do you say to the parents who run into that?
So, like, how do they reverse their discussion with their
Discussion with their
family?
children.
That's very, very difficult, and they have to sit down and depending on the age of the child, and you have to give certain information. If they're younger, hopefully they're not aware of this anyway. If they're much younger, but if they're old enough to be aware, there should be a clear discussion on dosed meds and possibly even show one of the spray bottles that is exact milligram dosing, or as opposed to smoking a joint. And it's a tough subject. It has to be dealt with delicately, but confidently, and where the child can feel safe, that the parents aren't all of a sudden changing and shifting their values. We're trying to save a family member's life. It's extremely important, and the science is there.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank you for being here. Thank you, and God bless.